Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Roman architecture of Trier, Germany, both its role in the Roman era and how it interacted with Trier's later history. So first, a little bit about Trier itself. It is a city located in the very, very west of Germany on the border between Germany and Luxembourg. It is one of the oldest cities in Germany, not just because of the Romans, but prior to this, the Celts lived in the area, a tribe called the Treveri, which is where Trier gets its name. In the 1st century BC, Trier was conquered by the Romans under the Emperor Augustus. And by late antiquity, it had turned into one of the most important cities in the Roman Empire. It had one of the biggest populations, as well as held the headquarters of the Roman emperor in the north. So in the whole Roman Empire, this was the headquarters of the north. It was a very important city, and that also brought a lot of cool architecture there and a lot of people contributing to the large population size. The first monument we're going to look at is the Porta Nigra, which translates as the Black Gate. It was originally built in 170 CE, and it served as the northern gate to the city. So the top right photo that you see there is the portion facing outward. So if you are a traveler walking into the city, that's what you would have seen. The lower right image is what you would see once you're inside the city. So it was a gate for the city. These two arches that you see in the bottom is where the travelers would have walked in and out. And those upper levels that you see above that would have served a mainly defensive purpose. So if the city was under attack, the soldiers would occupy those upper levels to defend the city. The wall would have been connected to, or the gate, sorry, would have been connected to a wall that ringed the city, also serving as a defensive feature. Beginning in the 11th century, the gate was transformed into a Christian church like you see in that left-hand image, and it stayed that way for about 700 or 800 years. You can see that this was a massive transformation, totally changed the look of the gate, overtook pretty much the entire monument. And in 1804, Napoleon showed up, took a look at that, and decided that he didn't like the look of it. He wanted the church to be destroyed, and he wanted the gate to be returned to its sort of purely Roman form. So at this time, I should mention Trier was under the control of the French because it's very in the west of Germany. At this time, it was under French control. So Napoleon ordered the church to be destroyed, and what you see today is the sort of purely Roman ruins of the gate. But it's important to note this is not what it looked like for the majority of Trier's history. It usually looked like that church, but Napoleon decided he didn't like it, so today we have the Roman ruins. Next up is the Roman Bridge. This is in the west of Trier, so it's located over the Mosella River. And it's the oldest standing bridge in Germany, which is a pretty big title. However, not all of what you see is Roman. So the upper portions are not Roman. What is Roman are those bottom portions where you see that black brick, similar to the Porta Nigra. The brick has turned black over time with age. Sediment builds up and changes the color. And so both the Porta Nigra and these bricks are now this black color, but they would not have been that in the Roman era. But it's a good way to distinguish what is Roman. So the lower black bricks are Roman, and the upper levels were added in the 12th and 18th centuries. As you can see in the lower left image, the bridge also would have led into an entrance to the city, similar to the Porta Nigra. We have a monumental arch sort of marking the entrance to the city there. Next up is the Aula Palatina. So we're starting to get into Constantine's architecture. Constantine was the Roman emperor starting in 306, and he was the first sole emperor in a long time. And so with this, he established these headquarters in these different parts of the Roman Empire. So the most famous, perhaps, is Constantinople, named after himself. That's modern-day Istanbul in Turkey. That was sort of his headquarters, the capital of the empire, but his northern headquarters were at Trier. And he built a palace there as well as a basilica. So the basilica is what you see in front of you. It was in a very traditional Roman style. This was a hallmark of Roman architecture that was taken directly from the capital. It is a largely rectangular building, but then you have a rounded end. That rounded end is where the emperor would have sat to receive guests. So this is a sort of assembly hall, a meeting hall. If you had a complaint, if you needed to get some administrative business done, you would head to the basilica to make your case and do business. It was sort of like the city hall or maybe even the DMV of the Roman era. And if you look in the bottom right corner, you can see how it would have interacted with the palace. So that cathedral that you see in the center of the photo there would have been the palace back in the day. It doesn't look anything like the same. It was totally redone. But back in the Roman era, that's where the main building of the palace would have been, and then you see the basilica in that upper right corner of the photo. So you can see how these two sites interact today, but in the Roman era, it would have been all one site. If you're thinking this whole time that this basilica looks a lot like a church, you are not wrong. So Roman basilicas directly influenced the design of the earliest Christian churches and a lot of basilicas that we see today. And this building is now a church, but only since the 19th century. So for the majority of the time, it was the bishop's living quarters for the whole Middle Ages. When he had his palace, the same place in that cathedral, his living quarters were in this basilica. But in the Roman era, it would have been a secular building, an administrative center, kind of like the city hall. Lastly, we have the imperial baths. So they were begun by Constantine's father, who was also an emperor, around the year 300, and then construction ended under Constantine in 316, but the complex is actually unfinished. So you can see that it was a grand building, a perhaps overly ambitious design, and so that's why it was never finished. But despite that, it was still a pretty opulent building. So baths in the Roman era were a sort of mix between gyms and spas, as well as a serious social gathering place in Roman society. So you would go there to work out. You can see in the front of that plan, that big open space, that's where you would do outdoor exercises. And then the indoor areas were more like the spa. So you had different rooms that were heated to different temperatures, and it was almost like a sauna. So there's an underground heating system called a hypocaust. And if you go there today, you can still see parts of the hypocaust intact underground. And so you would have had different temperature rooms. You would have had the frigidarium, which is the cold room, the tepidarium, which is sort of a neutral, warm room, and then the caldarium, which is the hot room, all heated by this underground heating system. So today you can see a lot of the big standing remains. It's a great tourist site. In Trier's later history, it was used as barracks for soldiers and then as a castle, a personal residence in the Middle Ages. So these are the main standing buildings of the Roman era in Trier today. There are a lot of other Roman buildings that would have been standing there that no longer exist, or perhaps only archaeology now. But you can see in this photo how the different architecture of Trier interacts. So we have the Roman era in that basilica, but we also have these medieval buildings and then the early modern and modern buildings. So Trier is truly a historic city for a lot of different eras. And I think it's important in the Roman era as this imperial headquarters, as a place with sort of hallmarks of Roman architecture. So you see these forms that you see in the heart of Rome, you see them transported to Germany, but Trier is also important for Germany's history because it shows the role of Rome in Germany's history. So Rome is suddenly a part of Germany's sort of nationalistic history as well now, because they have this connection through the architecture that still stands there. As I said, Trier is a multi-era city, so you see these Roman remains interacting with these medieval buildings, the early modern buildings, but I think its main importance, at least perhaps I'm biased, but I think its main importance is for the Roman era, and as well as seeing the link that Germany has to Rome today. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.